fear not, because once again, Joe is giving you his word as a Biden. Watch this.
Even in this moment, with all the challenges we face, I give you my word as a Biden, I've never been more optimistic about America's future.
Oh, really? During his 5-decade career in the Washington swamp, lying has been a way of life for Joe Biden. But his most recent pledge to unify the country might be his worst fabrication of all time. Remember this?
To restore the soul and secure the future of America requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity. Unity. Do you want to be on the side of Dr. King or George Wallace? Do you want to be on the side of John Lewis or Bull Connor? Do you want to be on the side of Abraham Lincoln or Jefferson Davis? My whole soul is in this: bringing America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause. It is the most pernicious thing. This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle. We can see each other not as adversaries, but as neighbors. We can treat each other with dignity and respect. That's a great asset. More inflation. What a stupid son of a bitch. We can join forces, stop the shouting, and lower the temperature. There's thousands of people in America going through that. And these Republicans ripped that out of the bill, but we're coming back. We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue. Trump and the extreme MAGA Republicans have made their choice to go backwards, full of anger, violence, hate, and division.
Well, there you go. Joining us now, Fox News contributor Charlie Hurt, former governor of Arkansas Mike Huckabee, and Fox News contributor Deroy Murdock. Gentlemen, thank you. Charlie, look, you've watched a lot of presidents. We've been around for a lot of elections. There's a lot of things that have been said by people all the time that we don't like. Would you agree that this is really unprecedented? And it strikes me as also almost hoping someone's going to tip over and something's going to start, some kind of spark is going to be lit. What is your take on this?
Well, first of all, the speech, I've never seen such an angry, rancid speech in which a president attacks the voters that he supposedly works for. I've never seen anything like it. It's and it's also very senseless because, you know, at another point in the speech, he starts talking about how this is not normal. And we heard that a lot during the 4 years of Trump's first term. But what's kind of weird about this is, well, my goodness, Democrats control the White House and both chambers of Congress. If it's not normal, maybe you should look at yourself. Maybe that's the problem. But Tammy, I think and it's kind of funny. I was calculating this in my mind before we went on, whether I would even say something like this. But I'm afraid you're right. If I were to be completely honest about it, I think he is doing everything he can to gin up something so that people do get out of hand. And that's a terrifying thing to contemplate. And it's a terrifying thing to contemplate a president trying to do that in order to benefit himself ahead of an election in which he's going to get punished for gas prices, inflation, an open border, and crime. Those are the issues that people care about.
Right. And you know, Deroy, we spent the summer of 2020 dealing with violence and riots, a group, of course, laughingly calling itself anti-fascists, were the ones that were involved a great deal in this. And yet here now we have that same sort of rhetoric saying now that Trump voters are semi-fascist, seemingly linking to this history of violence that all of us decry, that none of us want. Is this something that, you know, he alluded to that. There was one sentence of like, violence is never a tool we can use, almost as though to, you know, get it out of the way. What do you think Joe Biden expects to happen when rhetoric like this is used?
Well, I think I could take this rhetoric a lot more seriously if I'd heard it earlier. I remember during the Democrat convention in 2020, I listened carefully for any denunciation of Black Lives Matter's violence, the Antifa riots, the so-called Summer of Love, and I didn't hear that coming out of Joe Biden's mouth, out of Kamala Harris's mouth, or anything else. I didn't hear much comment from Joe Biden when an assassin was walking around on the lawn of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh with a Glock pistol. I think that was a great time for him to come out and say, this is no time for political violence. Let's turn down the temperature. But I would say this to MAGA Republicans and mainstream Republicans: don't underestimate Joe Biden. This was a very obnoxious, abrasive, aggressive speech. But I think he also gave the Democrats a battle cry, which is democracy. And I'm sure he'd rather have them talking about that than talking about critical race theory, 87,000 new IRS agents coming to torment all of us.
Yeah.
And like it or not, but I think it gives them something else to talk about. And rather than count the House seats that we've already won, we've not won anything. And
Right.
Republicans need to go out there and work very hard to win this victory, because nothing is baked in the cake yet.
That's a very good point. And Governor, you've run some races. You know what campaigning, what politics is like. And they clearly expect this to have some kind of benefit. Obviously, they won in the last election with so much violence surrounding the environment. Do you think they're going to realize this was a mistake, or is this what we're going to see up until the presidential election beyond the midterms?
Tammy, I think this is going to go down in history as the speech known as the "get off my lawn" speech, because basically Joe Biden tonight was an angry old man yelling at the camera and yelling at 74 million Americans and saying that we don't love democracy, we don't love America, that we're not honorable people. And all I have to just say to you is just that revs me up to want to go vote. Now, I'll be honest with you, I almost didn't make it on time tonight because after the speech, I had to go take a shower to get the spittle of Joe Biden off of me. I've never seen anything like it. This was the kind of speech that you would give in the heat of a campaign. You never give this kind of speech as a president. And honestly, I've never seen anything like it. I will tell you this, Joe Biden tonight, for a man who doesn't like fossil fuel, he used about 10 years worth of the natural gas supply in America, gaslighting, trying to project his anger on the rest of America. It was disgusting, shocking. But you know what? The reason it may work is because he has a partner, the media, and they'll be with him all the way.
You know, Charlie, you're in the media, right? You've got a great newspaper, the Washington Times. You think about your audience. We realize that there's a diversity of people who watch this program, who watch this network, who voted for Trump. Who now numbers are shifting when it comes to Hispanics and independents and libertarians, because as Americans, we all have the future in mind. We all care about our families. We all care about how they're being taught. We care about violence and crime and an open border. And you'd think that he would, as president, want to bring those people in. It's as though they're just throwing 70 to 80 million people overboard, not even by ignoring them, but by insulting them and essentially threatening them. Am I reading too much into that?
Yeah. No, I don't think so at all. And what is absolutely obvious from that speech tonight is that Joe Biden wants to talk about absolutely anything but those issues. And the thing that you just put your finger on that I think is so important is that you're right. Democrats care about paying high gas prices.
Yeah.
Democrats care about the safety of their children. Democrats care about not paying disastrous inflation prices at the grocery store. These are all issues that appeal to their own voters. And so the fact that he has no response whatsoever, cannot campaign on any of those things, just demonstrates how far out of touch he is with his own voters.
You know, it's interesting, Deroy, there was a poll, it was a Reuters poll, after the Mar-a-Lago raid and after the student loan bailout, and Biden went down 7 points in 1 week. Is this kind of, would you say this is a panic? Perhaps it's like there's nothing they can do. Maybe they thought the Mar-a-Lago raid would bring certain dividends, and that throwing more money at people would bring certain dividends, and that they really don't understand the American people and they don't understand our lives. And this is now just like the last hurrah of what it is they think they can do.
I think what Biden probably is trying to do is just get his base as excited as possible and hope that the far-left Democrats have been disappointed with him because he's not far-left enough, that this might get them excited and get them back into the fray. I mean, we always heard that Joe Biden is this great centrist, this wonderful moderate who's been kidnapped by Ron Klain and the White House staff. He's always been a leftist. He's been a leftist his whole career. Great point. He had a lifetime American Conservative Union rating of just 13%. So this guy's a leftist, and I think he's doing what his heart wants him to do, which is to appeal appeal to the left and hope that will get his numbers up high enough to prevent some kind of a total destruction in November.
You know, for any of us, and I have been one of them, thinking that he had been kidnapped and that none of this made any sense. The fact of the matter is, you know, it does make sense that this is exactly what he wants, and it's what Dr. Jill wants. All of them own what this is, and all of them will own what will be a horrible, embarrassing, a debilitating legacy for that entire family. And it's a shame. It's an insult to the Democrats, and it's an insult to every other American in this country. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me tonight. I appreciate it.